Got a little treat for you today. It's Friday, but it's not Tom. It's James.
Hey.
Hi, James.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, man. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. It's good to be here.
Caught up in the background, mate.
Oh,
You're ruining the vibe we got here.
I can tell that I'm new here. Good to be here. Thanks for having me on.
And James is, of course, one of the guys in the brewery, if not the man in the brewery. Hector's not here, so he can't stand up for himself.
Yeah, I'll say that I'm the Mead monkey. That's what they call me around here.
So, Tom's having some away time, which is nice.
Yeah.
A little different. Today, we're going to be going through our February tasting bundle. We're going to be talking a little bit about our small batch. We're talking about some of the experiments we've been putting on, some of the things we've been doing around the brewery, and doing a little more of a brewery-focused episode.
That's great. I'm really excited because this is all kind of showing off the best of the stuff that we've been making over the last few months. And the last tasting one was great as well, but it's always good to show off.
Like the cool thing about it is being able to grab different bits and go like, okay, cool. You know, like we don't have the bar anymore. We used to have the bar, and that was a really good place to do some of these smaller things and get them out to people and go, what do you think?
And have that face-to-face
have the feedback as well. And,
yeah.
and, you know, like it's all good to say, like, we really enjoy what we make. But, you know, it's always good to get that feedback, especially on some of the more experimental things. But I just realised, James, that we don't have a drink.
Should we just get started?
Let's get into it.
So what's the first thing we're going to tackle in this February tasting bundle?
Well, actually, James, I think before we get into that, I think there's one other drink that we should have, and I think you're going to have to get up and get it.
Oh, cool. I'm excited for this.
So we've been playing around with, you know, different sort of fermentation techniques and also different types of mead. Even some of the meads that we do, we've been, you know, trying lately to just make them a little bit different, see how it comes out. So this is our hops, but what we did was run it bone dry and then just primed it with a little bit of sugar to get a little bit of carbonation. And just to sort of see what happens when we run that dry and how tasty it is. So let's see if there's any carbonation in this. James, well done. Huzzah.
It hasn't gone everywhere, so that's good news.
Yeah, it's not overcarbonated. But yeah, how's your week been, James?
It's been really good, actually.
Carbonation looks good, mate.
That's great. It's been one of those weeks where I've had a little bit of time, just to catch up on all the kind of little projects and that we've kind of been meaning to do as brewers in the brewery, which is good because usually it's pretty rammed here in terms of like, you know, getting everything out to customers and all that sort of stuff. It's nice to actually get back to like brewing and working on some experiments, which has been good. So
when tell people about being brewers, you're like, you just play around, make stuff. You're like, actually, like 80% of my job is cleaning, 10% is brewing, and the other 10% is just like weird stuff around the brew house, whether it's maintenance or fulfilling orders from the web store or whatever we're doing. It's kind of, we're a small team, right? So there's like 4 of us here doing everything. You know, like we may look like a big production, like this doesn't come from nowhere. But yeah, this is we kind of do everything. All right, James, tell me what's going on here.
So this is our hopped, which we've let ferment completely dry. So with our normal hopped in cans, we stop the fermentation about sort of 3/4 of the way through, and that's where you have the sugar left over. So that's why it's still quite sweet. We pasteurize it and that fermentation. We thought it'd be really fun to see what happened if we just let it go completely dry. So the ABV's bumped up because more sugar's been fermented, and then to get some carbonation back into it, we primed it with some sugar and left it for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, so the carbonation is probably still, you know, because the other thing about bottle conditioning when you're at the end of fermentation as well is that carbonation process is going to take a long time. That yeast has already, you know, done so much work that by the time it gets to here, it has to clean itself up. And then we let it settle, and then we primed it. You know, like it's struggling a little bit. So it's been 2 weeks when usually we get 1 to 2 days when when it's raging 3/4 of the way through fermentation, and that carbonation will just build up super quick. And you know, the scary thing is getting it to stop. But yeah, guys, while we've got James on as well, if you've got any questions, any how'd you get on the website, you know, things like that, just chuck them up and we'll endeavour to answer them. But you've got James's expertise.
Send him over.
Yeah, so the carbonation usually takes 1 or 2 days with something a bit lower. This is, 2 weeks, and we're still probably about halfway through the carbonation. And look, we got lots of big bubbles. We don't really have any sort of consistency in the bubbles. But how's it tasting, James?
It's interesting to see what is behind the sugar. So kind of for the other compounds that are sort of lying behind that. So there's nothing to hide behind in that sense. But the hop character's really good on this.
Yeah,
it's great.
I'm actually
which makes me feel. I mean, I'm pretty confident about our product anyway, but it just makes me just to reassure ourselves that there's a lot of good stuff behind it. So usually with our products, we leave quite a lot of sugar in them from fermentation. So it's nice to see what this is like when it goes bone dry, which is, I guess, what most mead is traditionally. And then there's not as much to hide behind with that.
I'm back, James. I'm back.
Glad you got everything fixed.
Yeah, that's it. I'm good to go now. So saying that we leave quite a lot of sugar, and that's for a couple of reasons. That creates mouthfeel, gives you a little bit of something for your compounds to grab a hold of as well. Sugar isn't the devil when you're making things, but there is a limit.
Yeah,
right?
so that's not to say that that's a bad thing at all, because we're trying to bring forward the honey, which in the end is the main
product and a little bit of sweetness comes is how would you say, reminiscent of honey, right? Like that's one of the main characteristics in honey is that sweetness that comes with it. And like we talk about it, that it's quite difficult to see what the honey product's going to be right at the end. But that's kind of the fun. And with this here, the hop character's stuck, the aroma's there, it's good. So I would rate it, James. I'd make this again. Yeah,
this is one of the fun things about being a brewer, is that you can just have these experiments going on in the background whilst you're doing all your main work and getting products out.
Well, that's it. Especially when you can just grab a demijohn straight off the FE and go, all right, let that keep running. Just see what we do. Like it's one of the most simple things you can do. It's just weird that we've never done it before.
And so right now we're filming in the office, and it's always nice to come in here sometimes and you just got a full shelf full of bubbling demijohns bubbling away.
Yeah, we've got our own little section as well,
and
right?
You just know that stuff's kind of working, behind the scenes. And
considering we have bottles everywhere that are in that process of like fermenting, cap, pressurizing, we don't really get that many explosions. Like we had one today that I came in this morning and it's just bubbles just starting to come out of the top of the bubbler, and I was like, I'm going to take that into the brewery because that's going to cover everything. And then about an hour later, it's just foaming and popping bubbles everywhere.
I'm really excited for that. That's going to be the next small, not the next small batch, but the small batch afterwards.
Okay, yeah.
In March, the March release, April release. Sorry, that's the April release. So
we are working so far into the future.
That's great. It gives me enough time to get something together.
Well, that's it. So run us through, kind of your ideas for that, I guess, like. Because, we're all sort of grabbing a different month, and, we're sort of run through some of the small batch stuff that we did over over last year. We did lots of like experimentation, some of the things that we always wanted to do, and we're still running through those now. But now it's sort of the time to start working on some of our own little projects and put them towards a small batch. So yours are getting released in March. What are you thinking?
In April.
April.
I guess the whole idea of the small batch is to just try out different techniques, different yeasts, different honey, showcase those, and get that sort of full picture of what mead can be. For my project in April, I've gone for the seasonal route, so I'm just trying to use seasonal things. Rhubarb and dandelion were the first two things that came up. So we're at the moment experimenting with dandelion root, dandelion dandelion leaf, and dandelion coffee, which I've never heard of or worked with, but we'll see how it works in a brew.
Yeah, like my missus gave me that, and I actually quite like it just as a coffee.
Yeah,
like it's just interesting. Like it's coffee-like, but it's also got this earthiness to it. It's got a little bit of complexity.
Is it caffeinated or is it like decaf?
No, it's not. Yeah, it's just more like a coffee alternative.
Okay, cool.
Kind of like chicory is and stuff like that.
So yeah, I'm just trying different techniques using the rhubarb as well. Rhubarb can be notoriously hard to work with, but I'm just seeing what the best way is to get the most out of that rhubarb flavour. And it's really nice to do this far in advance.
Yeah, that's it. So you don't press up against it. Like you can start playing with ratios, different ways of extracting as well, which is kind of cool. There's a process, let's take ginger for example. Do you use fresh ginger, dried ginger? Do I make a tea out of it? Do I alcohol extract it? Do I cold extract it? Do I blood temp extract it?
Stop. You just give me too many ideas. Too many ideas.
But let's finish up on this, James. And
let's get
what we're
started
going to get into today, we kind of went through some difficulties before, but we're all back up and we're running now. The internet works. We're going to go through our February tasting bundle, and then for you guys who had it at home and tasting with us now, we're not going to do the 4-pack with this. Where you can jump on, you can see we've done 4-pack so many times. We thought, you know what, we're just going to have a nice little chat, and then we're going to do the 4 meads that they're changing, which is the more premium meads. So let's get into it, James.
What's the first one we're going to tackle then?
So we are going to look at doing the Hackney, James. I think we're going to start from the furthest away and work our way back.
That sounds great. I'm really excited.
So the Hackney, James. Do you remember when we made this?
You know what? I think you might have made this just before I joined.
Oh, really?
Or if we did brew it, because we brewed this 2 years ago, or coming up to 2 years ago, and I'd have just joined, I think. This was part of the Mead of the Month program we did.
We took about 30 litres of that, and we kept it off in a keg on the side and waited for the right time to bring this up, and the February tasting bundle was that. So without any further ado, it's made with honey from the Hackney Marshes. So it's just honey done in with our house yeast here. Similar fermentation to all our other Mead of the Months. Let's have a go, James. So straight away, because we've just had that there's just so much more going on in that. So this here is a little bit funky. There's some floral notes in there. There's definitely some fruit underneath.
Lots of pear.
Lots of pear. Yeah, pear, apple. There's even a little bit, maybe a little bit tropical now.
Yeah. It's definitely cleaned out quite a lot since we brewed it. It's for me, it's very kind of citrusy and pear-like.
Yeah, it's 9% too. You know, so this is one of the highest we've ever pushed our house yeast.
Yeah,
which is kind of cool. Usually we stay around the 6-7%, but this time we decided to really go for it.
That is gorgeous. That's really good. Yes, it's pears, it's lemon, bit of fruit salad kind of as well.
Yeah, it's
and the alcohol's really, it's 9%, but it doesn't feel it.
Yeah, no,
it's warming, but it's
when we
smooth.
first made it, it was a little bit more intense on the alcohol, but this is so much more subdued. The sugar, the balance is quite nice as well. Like this is all right.
So we only brewed this on a 200-litre scale, and we sold most of it in bottles, didn't we? But we had enough we had a keg of it, enough to do some cans, and now I'm just thinking, I wish we'd just done this all in cans.
It's nice. I do prefer the bigger bottles. I do prefer that sort of
the premium side of it.
It's more of a sharing and talking experience, but it's nice to be able to have the ability to then punch them out to people at home to try that more of our premium side of our mead making.
There's a lot of it's very reminiscent of Perry's and ciders.
Yeah, it's got that, but with the booze behind it and just probably a little bit bigger body. Usually when you punch up the ABV in, let's say, a Perry, it's usually quite dry and there's been a lot of sort of sugar in that season to get the ABV up, because a lot of those like premium makers also don't want to be adding sugar to their Perrys or ciders, so they keep that ABV, whatever that season's produced.
It's just amazing. It just goes to show how much honey can do.
Oh man, it's incredible.
All the colour, all the subtleties in the taste and aromas. Amazing.
Well, James, speaking of cider,
what a segue.
Let's move on to the second one in this, which is a collaboration that we did with Hawk Cidery up there in Bermondsey. Mm-hmm. This is done with a 2018 Dabinet, so like we were just talking about, it was a hot season that year, tons of sugar. Some of the Dabinet even went up to 8-9%. And then we blended that with our hopped mead. We regulated it a little bit, took it down to 5.5%, put it into can, carbonated it, and here we are.
And we had a chat with Theo, didn't we? Not last week, the week before.
Yeah, such a lovely man. Like both Theo and Max there at Hawks are just incredible cider makers.
Really knowledgeable.
Incredible cider makers.
Really nice guys.
Just, have all the time in the world for them, and I can't wait to have another chat and do another collab with them. But before we get into that, let's get into this.
Yeah.
So first thing is I just get, compared to everything else, the apple is just so strong. Like we talked about the last one having some apple in there. This is like apple and honey together, like. The other thing that's quite different, especially when you start getting to the palate, is that tannin structure, and that dryiness that gets towards the end of the palate. It's just
and that all comes from the skins of the apples.
It comes from the skins of the apple, and that's kind of where you get a little bit of that tannin structure, and that's reduced. I remember the Dabinet on its own was quite intense and tannic, with also quite a bit of quite a bit of acid and quite a bit of funk on the nose as well. That West Country cider sort of feel to it as well, but mixed with our semi-sweet mead, you get a little bit of the hop character come through on the nose. You get a little bit of sweetness in the body, but then you get these nice sort of complex sort of apple characters that come out, and this is one of my favourite of our collabs. It
is very refreshing, and I have to agree as well. This is my favourite collab we've done so far.
Oh, I love it. I could drink that all day.
I know.
Sunshine, book in hand. This is kind of where I'd like to be, right? Oh, so guys,
we need to do some more of these sizes for sure.
100%.
So size is one of those crossover drinks. As kind of mead started falling out of favour in Europe, and you had more sort of cider coming through and more wine production. It was just one of those kind of crossover drinks where people were just using any sugars that fermented.
So yeah, just scream through it because we love this so much. But on the nose is a little bit of the hop character underneath. There's a little bit of like custard apple in there too.
Yep.
And then it's drying on the nose. I know it's sort of weird to say that there's like a drying quality on the nose, but it just, I don't know, you can almost smell that.
You can almost smell the acidity. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. But
the best thing about this is that we do quite a few collabs, but it's really hard to get a nice marrying of the collab with the honey. You know, we always struggle making, like a braggot or, just half beer, half mead, and going dry, and you lose all the honey character, and you lose all the, all the essence of the mead as well. You know, and when we do these sorts of things, we want to be showcasing the best of both worlds. And this collab, I think we kind of hit the nail on the head, James.
Yeah. I mean, I think honey is notoriously tricky to blend with other sugar sources in alcohol.
Well, that's it, because the yeast really loves to chew through that first.
Yeah.
It really likes to
because it's such a simple form of sugar, isn't it?
That's it. And when you got things like in beer where you have maltose and maltodextrin and all these sort of things produced in that process, that's kind of what's left over, and that becomes a dominating sort of character. Thank you.
All right, ready for the next one?
M&D, James.
God, I'm going to have to buy one of these February tasting ones. Great.
So, James, I know you love this one. Talk to me.
So this is another one of our Mead of the Month. This is from our Mead of the Month program that we did last year. And this is, I think, number 8 in the lineup. So every month we did a different mead made out of a different type of honey that was either monofloral, so all the bees had gone to one specific plant to forage the nectar to make the honey, or it was single origin, so they foraged within a 3-mile radius, I think, in one area around in the UK. This particular one is heather. Now, heather honey is kind of notorious in the mead world, I guess, because it's really hard to extract for beekeepers. It's really full of proteins and wax, and it's really thick and viscous. And then the flavors that come through are a massive blend of like savory and sweet. This, as you know, is a massive what's the sweet?
Marzipan.
Massive marzipan bomb. It's a lot.
So yeah, I just put my nose into it, and like.
Before we get into this, do you remember brewing this?
Yeah, look, it was the only time that I've ever gone home, and I know I've told this story 100 times. It's the only time I've ever gone home from work, and my partner turned around and she was like, "You need to go and clean yourself because you stink like honey."
Everyone from the building came down today, and they were like, "What are you making? Everything smells of honey."
It's so intense. It's musky. It's like boiled lollies and sweets and marzipan and grass and bog myrtle, and like it's just
crazy.
It's like English countryside on a wet day. mixed with that 2 weeks of summer that we get here. Like it's.
And when we receive that honey to brew with, it comes in, like 15-litre buckets. And as we're pouring the water in and we're getting a nice little whirlpool in to get some nice mixing going on, I'm opening these buckets, I'm tipping them upside down, and it's just coming down like
like treacle.
Like treacle. It's
even
so
more,
slow.
Even slower. It looked like fudge.
Yeah.
Like not even like dripping caramel.
Yeah.
It looked like fudge.
Not liquid.
It was it was a long brew day.
It was.
So we decided to do this in a 2-stage fermentation as well. So we did this with our house yeast up to about 6%, and then we pitched a red wine yeast at the top just to push it up to that 10.5. And then we just kind of let it go until it couldn't go anymore, and it ended up at about 10.5% with a decent amount of sugar. So let's get into it.
Yeah, and straight away it's just marzipan.
So the funky...
but behind that there's a little bit of kind of refreshing acidity there as well.
There's some boiled, I know I said boiled lollies for like boiled sweets, but there's also like some candied lemon peel sort of thing going on.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a lot of, I don't know how you'd say it, like, have you ever been to Turkey, or have you travelled around that area at all?
No, not...
Or like there's just some kinds of sweets that you get in that part of the world, which are kind of a mix of savoury, and like sometimes you get like candied fennel seeds. That kind of thing. That's quite popular in India.
Turkish delight, right?
Turkish delight as well, yeah. And
like rose petal used in that sort of process.
And that's what this reminds me of. It's obviously...
Yeah, I can get the Turkish delight, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of cool.
It's massively sweet, and but you get this kind of like herbal thing with it as well. I mean, I've only just picked up on the fennel.
Oh, and it goes to the palate, James. Big honey palate. Like, it's so complicated on the nose that you can be forgiven to think that it's not, a huge honey aroma on the nose. Gets to the palate, and you're getting honey in the front of the palate. In the middle there, you're getting all these like spices and all this herbal character, a little bit of florality going on. And then it sort of starts to pan out, and then it's a little bit musky, and it's starting to get like a little complicated at the back, and you're getting this tannin structure, you're getting this like herbaceous sort of green feeling in the mouth. And I always attribute colours to flavours, but
it's quite bitter as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's got this bitter note to it, but the sweet, it's this bittersweet. I love this, and when you buy the 750ml bottles, like we've sort of decanted those into these, but in the 750ml bottles, down the bottom is this, waxy, almost like protein-based sort of like floating middle at the bottom of the bottle that, on the right day, at the right temperature, kind of looks like rolling hills of protein, which is kind of cool.
Well, it used to be, heather honey used to be considered a foodstuff, because it was so full of like wax and fats and proteins and like other sort of natural organic compounds from the hives. I think it was the Picts. I think it was the Picts who used to eat that as a
stuff,
high calorie honey.
Man, and you can
sugar
see
sauce,
it. Like
yeah.
It's like no other honey that we've ever worked with. Like
you say, it's like spooning it. It's like fudge.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, there's no like dripping off the bottom. It's just it's like picking up a spoonful of butter.
Yeah.
But last one, James. The botchet. Is it pronounced botchet?
I believe it's bocket.
Bocket.
Boucher.
Yeah, it's the boucher. Before we get there, I'm just gonna get a rinse out on this, James, just because that last one is very, very intense. And I just want to clean it up and get that palate going. So let's move into it. And straight away you can see that colour, James. What gives it the colour?
So a boucher, or boucher, however you want to say it, is a mead where a portion of the honey used to brew it is caramelized. And obviously in that caramelization process, you're essentially cooking and burning the honey, so you get some decolorization, so it sort of goes dark, and then you mix that back in with the rest of your honey bill, and you get this gorgeous kind of this kind of brown, this
yeah, because some people make
sherry
bouchers where they do 100% of the honey and they caramelize it. And
some people do it 20%, but traditionally we've done it where it's a little bit more towards the 50-50 side, and that's worked really well. And you get some of those kind of roasted and like coffee and a bit more sort of bitter flavors.
Yeah,
coming
and then we barrel ferment with our bouchers as well. Like we do a lot of barrel fermenting here, but not with everything. But the boucher really lends itself to that micro-oxidization. We quite like 71B as a standard yeast. Like that's a very popular mead yeast for a reason. Like it works across things, but I think it really works well here. In that caramelization process, you're also making some more unfermentable sugars more fermentable, and you're also making some of the simple sugars unfermentable. So you're getting this nice little changeover of the sugars, which allows you to have a little bit more residual sweetness and a little bit more perception of sweetness as well with that caramelization. When you put your nose into it, you smell caramel and you smell coffee. It just has this and there's a little bit of fudge in there as well for me, but it just has the perception of sweetness as well that goes with it. This one we barrel aged for about 8-9 months, I think. It's 13% alcohol. Let's get into the nose, James.
Gotta say before I do that, this is the funnest brew day ever as well. Yeah. This basically what this involves is me putting about 50 kilos of honey into a kettle, taking it outside, putting it on top of an open fire barbecue, and then just burning, and then just cooking honey basically.
Taking little samples every 5 minutes and just watching that caramelization happen over an hour period, which is really cool, and then dialing in that process of going, okay, how much caramel do we want to go? We don't want to burn the caramel, or we don't want to burn the honey, and we don't want to under caramelize it either. So there's quite an art form in deciding when that honey is ready to be taken off and ready to go into that brew. But as you know as well, with that 50 kilos, like when you caramelize something, that expands something shocking. So if you're not watching it and you raise your heat too much, next thing you've just got this rush of boiling honey coming out of the pot, which
we know too well.
Yeah, we know too well. So now we use quite a big, tall pot and just don't allow that process to get too high. But there's no way of stopping it once it gets going.
And these bouchers have just gotten better and better every time we brew them.
Yeah, this is probably the 4th or 5th iteration we've done.
Yeah, that's right.
And every one that we do is better than the last.
So, I mean, anyone who's trying this now, some of the things that might come to your mind when you're drinking this is sherry.
Yeah.
And is it Madeira? Sweet Madeira?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got these and that's there's port as well, fortified wine. Anything that's barrel aged is going to have a similar sort of profile.
Yeah.
And just it's that mixing of oxygen with some of the compounds that create these sort of like nutty and some of these aromas that come out of that are just from that process.
Yeah.
So what are we getting on the nose, James?
Well, nutty is a really good word actually. That's
it's almost like toasted almonds, right?
Toasted almond character. A little bit of spice. We don't use any spice in the brew.
Yeah,
but
it's just honey, and it's just another representation, another technique to work with the honey and just to get a different profile out as well.
Yeah. A little bit of a sort of roasted, toasted flavour, I guess, going back to what you're saying with the nuts, but maybe a little bit more in the kind of going towards the coffee side, like a very sort of cold extract kind of coffee.
But then here's the palate. You got to remember, this is 13%. I know we had a little bit of drink, we slowly worked our way up in the percentage-wise, but the alcohol is so subtle, it's had time to calm down in the barrel. It hits your palate and it's like sweet at the front, but then it's quite acid driven. And then you get all the nice sort of at the back, all the nice caramel notes seem to come out and really give some complexity to this. And then all that barrel work just comes into play as well.
It's not just sugar and time. It's there's a lot of acid profile there, and there's not actually a lot of residual sugar left in this. It's just the perception is there, a bit like a sherry. It's kind of driven. It's quite refreshing.
So James, out of the 4, or out of the 8,
100% Boucher.
Boucher?
Go for it, yeah. I mean, I love all of them. Depends what you want it for, though. I think we did this in exactly the right order.
So let's do at home. It's November. It's raining. It's cold, and then it's the 5th of August. You've got a long weekend.
What day is the 5th of August?
Well, let's say it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Let's say it's a Monday.
It's a Monday.
But it's the first day of your 2 weeks of summer holidays.
I'm sitting down in a big armchair in front of an open fire.
November, I'm guessing, not...
No, this is November. Yeah. With a Boucher, and some kind of dog to my side.
Somebody's dog.
Just somebody's dog that I'm dog sitting for a while.
So the Boucher for that.
Boucher for that.
Summer
and
experience.
Sizer. I'm gonna have to go for the Sizer.
See, I I'm with you. Like, if I think of open fireplace, it's a real toss up between the Heather and the Boucher, but I'm probably going to go for the Boucher. I'm just so in love with that style and how tight they've got that. But then, if it's me, first day of my holidays, summer, I'm actually going to go for the Hackney.
Yeah.
I quite, a little bit higher ABV, sugar levels right. The sizer, like deck chair once I'm settled in, but like just to go like, I'm on holiday, Hackney. So that's our tasting bundle.
That's fantastic.
And James is just going to jump up and just go check everything. And got a few questions in about our small batch program, especially about the Plantain and Blueberry they're working on. James, do you want to
talk a bit about that?
Yeah, let's get into that for 5 minutes.
So for that, we used a blossom base. I think what we wanted to create was a little bit more of that American style kind of flavored mead, using natural ingredients. So we have these two bourbon barrels that we use for a lot of the small batch projects. So we brewed a blossom base into that up to about 5%, 6%. And then we actually had a really fun day earlier this week where we bought loads of plantain and we cooked them and mashed them up and caramelized them with a blowtorch, torched them, and we put that into the barrel. So we're just letting those flavors blend before adding some blueberries and back sweetening with some maple syrup. Yeah,
so it was kind of interesting with this because we wanted to do, like I said, an American style. We also want to do it a little bit more closer to home, right? So we did it at an ABV that we really like, which is around about that sort of 5.5%. We want to use, the plantain to create like a little bit of mouthfeel. Like we've done you're having a boucher there. We've done a banana boucher.
Yep.
And I just love how that potassium-driven banana, same as mango, has this like creamy, full, textured mouthfeel that it applies. You don't get a lot of that aroma on the nose, but you get tons of it on the palate. And that's kind of, the plantain side of it. And then we're using a little bit of blueberry and maple syrup just to give it a little bit of like, that American sweet oomph, like people talk about us in the UK and go like, oh, mead's quite sweet. Wait till you try some of those sweet meads in the US, like these sort of like 13, 14%, beautiful, big body, tons of honey, tons of fruit, like we just don't have that sort of in our arsenal, or not in our arsenal, like in our range. Like we just don't have a, we're not big fans of that style, right?
Yeah.
Like I like it, but it's super rare that I'll be like chasing it or wanting to get it. But a semi-sweet or even a dry mead like that runs really really deep in my veins.
Well, I think what we've proven with both tasting bundles, the Bee's Knees and the February tasting bundles, that we can sort of do the full range of them, where we have dry styles and we have sweeter styles. And you're right, I'm not a huge fan of the really sort of liqueur kind of thick, heavy sugar side of it either. But I think what we're trying to get is that kind of, that there's a balance, right? There's a balance.
Yeah, there's a perception of sweetness too. Like we play around with different levels of sweetness from, 1 point, like a really low gravity point and like, 1.002, I might as well say it, all the way up to like 1.010, so that 1010 or 1002. There's not much difference in the perception of sweetness, but there's also quite a difference in the amount of sugar. So you're going from like 1 to 2 grams a liter all the way up to 20 grams a liter, and you're not really noticing that. And I think it was the guys at Moonshine Meadery that really showed me, if you really work tight at a low recipe with a little bit of back sweetening, you can really bump up the perception of sweetness without without overdoing it.
Yeah.
And they were so good at that. And like, everything they had was the same sweetness across it, and they really dialed in that process. And I do like the variability of sweetness. But I had it and I was like, this tastes really balanced with the acid, balanced with the honey. And then when he's like, we only back sweetened 2 points from bone dry, and I was like, I would have guessed this was 10-10, 10-12.
Yeah, I think it's the same story with this. You might think there's a ton of sugar in this Bochet, and there isn't. It's, speaking in brewers terms again, the specific gravity of this came out something like 1.012, something like that, around there.
Yeah.
So not only a
when you're
little.
talking 13% alcohol and 3.4 pH.
Well, that's only a tad bit more sugar than you find in normal beers. Yeah. Or like normal sort of craft beers or whatever. But it's the whole thing of like if you have a teaspoon of lemon juice and a teaspoon of sugar, and you can have the same amount of sugar in there, but if you have more lemon juice, the perception's different of whether it's acidic or sweet. And same thing with this, because you have all these acids being produced during fermentation.
Yeah, because not a lot of people know that alcohol itself is an acid.
Yeah, right. And that you have this quite heavy acidic base and just a little bit of sugar to kind of balance it out, and the perception of sweetness is as if there's a lot of sugar in there.
And this is it, and this is your techniques as a mead brewer, right? Is to be able to use those two things to to regulate that sweetness, or to balance out a drink, or to give it another tone. Like you look at the a sour beer per se, and it's not necessarily about how much residual sugar or how much alcohol's in there. It's all about producing more acid. Your pH stays about the same, but your titratable acidity is a lot more skewed towards the lactic acid, and that just gives you that
because it's perceived as a body, and like
and that's the other thing, certain things give them characteristics, so with a higher alcohol and a higher acid profile, you're getting, you use the wood to give you that tannin structure, to give you that round mouthfeel, but you're also sort of using the residual sugar as a driving force as well for all those fun compounds that are in there as well.
Yeah.
But James, we've really struggled through today, but I thought we'd at least finish up and continue what we were talking about, because it's annoying, but we'll just be back at it again next week, and we'll deal with the problems as they go. So guys, I thought we'd jump back on and apologise for another week of internet problems, but we are sorting it out.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Also,
James, thanks for being on, and you're going to be on more often, so get used to it.
Great. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.